Well, it's late September and the beans are still great, which is really surprising. And there's a huge volume of them as well. There are one or two that are getting a bit rough and, you know, potentially stringy, but I am amazed. We haven't had any below zero nights, which I guess helps, but it is surprising that the beans have come so late. They were a bit stunted by all that really warm weather we had in the UK, but right now they're just fine. So we're having some for dinner. We've got quite a lot in the freezer, not as many as last year because, well, that delayed sort of growth of the beans meant that we sort of filled the freezer with other stuff, which I guess is what happens. Right, I'm going to carry on picking these, and then, well, I'm going to share with you what the heck I'm going to do with my shed. Yeah, it's a challenge. I can't say I've really still totally made up my mind, but I've changed my plans, so I'll let you know what I'm thinking. So I can't really imagine being without a shed on the plot. I use it for so many things, not least sheltering in when it's pouring with rain and I'm doing my winter work. And this old shed, well, I got it second hand and I've had it a good 10, 11 years perhaps. And I've already reskinned it once with new featherboard, but you'll probably notice it's not straight, it's sort of leaning that way, which means that if you look at this door, the distance between this straight stretcher here at the beginning and the end is very different because I had to create a door that was on an angle, and even that's dropped now as the ground's moving underneath, I think. I've put a few strips on to try and stop water ingress, and then recently I've been going in the mornings and finding substantial wet areas where the roof unfortunately is leaking. Now my original plan was to lift this. I've got lots of people offering to help me lift it and to move it straight ahead onto the left hand side of my growing bed in the allotment. And well, I've stuck with that plan. I've had huge amounts of suggestions from viewers and subscribers. Some say nail some wood against the side and pick it up like a chair. Others have said put rollers down and roll it across. Lots of people say keep the roof on because that gives it rigidity, and when you come to move it, then that'll be important. Others have said don't take the shed. If it's aged and not likely to move with any great ease, then leave it for the new incumbent and get yourself a new one. So all that's gone into the melting pot, including where to put it, because, well, I had a plan to put it there and I've listened to everybody's suggestions, and there's been huge amounts of suggestions. Let me show you some of the things people have suggested. So this is the area that I plan to put it, and it's quite a long bed, and you can see it's about the right width. And if I want to have water caught from the roof draining, then I would need to have containers probably either side. And well, that's going to take up a lot of space. It'll certainly eat up some of this space of the leak bed that I've got here. The reason I wanted to go the whole length of this plot was because on the back I've got what is potentially going to be a fruit cage, which is where I used to keep the silky hens, which are now residing at Danny's. And this cage doesn't have a back. The back is created by the back of the shed. So the idea was I could keep the whole stretch of shed and cage and put it in that location. So what else has been suggested? Well, one or two said, why not put it up onto your fruit area where you've got a lot of space and keep it up there so that you can utilize this bed for growing in the future. Well, it's an idea, but I'm loath to pick up all this membrane, which has served me well. And I've got trees planted, and I'd have to lose certainly a big chunk. I could lose something in the way of gooseberries and replant gooseberries, but again, it's a bit of a problem because I'd have to pick up all that membrane. And I don't know if you can see from here, but there's one hell of a slope on my fruit garden, and it doesn't really matter the way I've got it set up, but in terms of a shed, I would certainly need to find a way of leveling it, so that's quite a lot of work too. So not so warming to that way of positioning the shed. The other thing that people have said is use your IBCs, which is these two big tanks, to catch the runoff from the shed. And that makes perfect sense because they capture an awful lot of water. And to do that, you need to have them adjacent to the shed. And if I brought them over here, that would start to really impinge on space. I would have to think about taking this walkway space as well, which isn't a great issue, but it's a big footprint up here. Lots of people have said scrap the idea of moving the shed, put a new one down here and level this space out and put your shed down here to capture the water. And that's got a lot of advantages, because if I could keep the IBC tanks down here, they're most useful for watering the polytunnel during the heat of the summer. And I intend to move this out of here, so I could well put two of these together here and then have runoff from the shed filling up these two. And you can link IBC tanks. I've got these tap fittings on at the moment where it's got two outlets, so you can open this outlet, this lower one, connect it to the same outlet on the other, and then the water equalizes across the two. So there's a lot of mileage in putting these two across. And then if you want to run off water, you just use this external valve, and that will then lower the water level in both of the tanks at the same time. So what could I do in the way of space down here? Let's have a look. Stop press. I lost some glasses the other day, and I thought it might be over the allotment. I looked twice, couldn't find them. This morning, there they are. It's all right, they're only readers, they're only cheap, and they'll be fine. But you just can't see them on the wood. I saw them today, that's good. Right, yes, this space over here. Good morning. So, what do I want to accommodate over here if I were to use this space? I do need to get my compost bays somewhere on the plot, and I do need a reasonably flat location for putting potatoes. And if I were to put the shed over here, then really this space is going to get a bit tight once you add water barrels and things in. So I'm thinking if I were to do that, I would need to lose these two beds, put the shed next to the IBC tanks, and then have a space for more water barrels to catch more water, and then have a space for potatoes. And I could probably get my bays of compost in this space here. So that's a real big change to what I was originally planning. But it's quite an idea. Lots of people suggested I put my compost bays against the fence. But if you look back at my videos, you'll see that I intentionally move them from that area to over there because there's so much weed ingress from the wild bank outside that the compost, when I came to use it, was full of weed. And that made it a very laborious process. So I need to get at least a good distance away from this border. And I'm thinking perhaps along there might work out. Lots of people ask me why I don't put my compost bays right up next to the gate, where of course I wouldn't have to travel very far when I got a delivery, and it'd be very easy to unload. The truth of the matter is that horse compost gives off quite a strong odour, and I have had at least a comment when I bailed it into here from local neighbours, understandably, and therefore I think I need to continue to keep it away from the gate so that there's nobody who's concerned about where I'm keeping it. So at the moment my plans are, well, malleable. I'm warming to the idea of having IBC, shed, barrels, potatoes and compost all the way down there. And I also have started to realise that the shed is not as strong as I might like. And when I moved my cooker the other day, I noticed I've got a hole in the back of the shed there, and I've got water coming in the top in a number of places. I've got a very big hole down in that corner, and I've got a broken door jamb stretcher here. It's very rotten, very soft. I could just pull that off so easily, and the corners are rotten as well. So the more and more I look at it, the more I'm thinking, whilst the outside of this shed might look quite reasonable because I skinned it, I fear that it might collapse on movement. Lots to think about, but I think I'm changing my plans. The old chicken run on the back here, I would take down the tarpaulin so that it's a fully open cage. And whilst it doesn't have a back, I've got quite a lot of this wire mesh, which will come down in the reasonably near future. And I can use all that to create the back for this. And then it would be a standalone cage. And then as a standalone cage, there are a whole number of places it could go, not least on this space if I don't use it. And half of this then could be dedicated to growing some fruit that tends not to survive bird attacks, and that might be blueberries or something like that. So yeah, I could split up the shed and the cage and take the cage with me. So thanks for all your suggestions. It's certainly got me thinking. Right, enough talking. Get on with some proper work. Oh, well, in my last video, I was preparing pots for garlic growing, and we're fast approaching that time. In fact, I might even get to it, but I've got to clear this area out because I think this is the best place to store those pots during the winter months when I'm doing all that rearranging on the plot. So I think what I'm going to do is just clear up, get rid of the weed growth, perhaps move a couple of things out and see what space I've got for accommodating pots for growing garlic. Right, it's time to clear. Surprising how much comes out of there. That's a good opportunity to get control of the hedge as well, which tends to block the light in this area. There we are. That's virtually clear. And the weed is easy to pull out because it's a membrane down here, which I put down a long time ago, and wood chip. And whilst the wood chip is broken down a lot, the roots don't really get down, so it's easy. I'm sticking with my plan. Every time I take the wheelbarrow down there or move towards the shed, I bring something up to the polytunnel. Right, well, I guess the next step is to fill a couple more pots with my compost and bring them over here and see what garlic I've got. Right, compost. Right, there's some more of my bins, and I filled 4 of them, and they're looking just perfect. Already got some sycamore seeds on them from the tree above, so won't hurt to be moving these now. And I think I'll take from this one again, which was really good. Okay, so into here and fill up those pots. I'll bring you back when I'm done, because I've already shown you this. Well, that gives me 8. I had trouble getting some of those pots apart, so hopefully when it gets a bit cold they'll move. So 8 of these. They're quite heavy because it's quite moist. So I think I am going to get my barrow and ferry them over, even though it's a bit awkward in the barrow with these pots. Right, let's get them closer to their resting space. I will fill that tomorrow morning. It's been a while since I've really worked that hard on the plot. That usually happens in winter, but hey, you got to start somewhere. So given that these are, I think, sort of 50 litres, the bigger ones, and 30 the smaller, let's call them 40. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's over 300 litres of compost there out of that compost bin, and I'm probably only a third of the way through it, and the other 2 are bigger, so there's going to be plenty of compost. It does go quite a long way, but of course when you've got big beds you soon eat it up. Right, that's the strenuous bit, although I have got to get it round there. Let's have a look at the garlic. I know, what do you think? I'm branching out into merchandise. No, I'm not. I had this made up years ago and I've always felt a bit, well, bashful about wearing it. But today I thought, what the hell? It's a nice day. I'll show it off. Okay, let's have a look at the garlic. So this is all garlic that I grew this year, and it came from a variety of different types of garlic, but all from the Isle of Wight. And I'm not really good at labeling and keeping, you know, a sort of handle on what's what, but with garlic I find that when we cook with it, it's all good. So I'm sort of resorting to my usual approach, which is if it's a big and good looking garlic, I'll use some of that for next season. And I've got a couple here that when I was preparing them for taking them home, I took the sides off instead of keeping all of the skin on the outside. So I'm going to use those as well. And in here I've definitely got at least one sort of purpley variety, probably 2 or 3 actually. And then this is a different variety again. So I'm going to split these up. As is customary, I'm going to spare you all the over and over again garlic information, but in reality you break these up into their individual, I call them bulbets, but if I break one off I'll show you what I mean. There we go, into the individual sections, and then I'm going to put, I think, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in each one, and this will fill all these, I'm sure. If I feel like doing 8 I will, but the aim is to have reasonable space between them so that they grow uninhibited, and hopefully this compost that's my own and should be the old white rot free will give us some nice garlic for next year. Right, fast forward and I will split them up and plant them. There it is, 8 pots with probably 7 or 8 in each. So more than enough garlic for next year. And if I feel so inclined, I can always add another pot, but I've taken all the small sections home because I want them to be really healthy plants. So they'll go back for using with cooking, and everything else in these pots ready to grow. It's good to get the garlic in. Right, get them down behind the polytunnel now in the space that I've made. Right, all in place. Sitting there fine, won't come to any harm. And the important thing with garlic is that it gets cold, and that will. And there's a space for another one there if I want to. You've seen in my last video how my pears are being attacked by birds, I think probably jackdaws. So I harvested them all. They've all gone into the garage and the fridge. And I had 70 pears in total. And this morning when I was to and fro with those pots, I looked up and saw that my apples are getting the same level of attack. At least there's one there that's been heavily munched. So I think it's going to be time to take the apples down very soon. I will keep an eye, but that one's got a little bit of a pinky tinge to it, and I think the birds, they sure know when they're ripe. Well, I set the camera down and I was thinking, why would I leave all those apples up there just to be pecked? So I've left a few up there for the birds. There's a few on the ground, but I've picked the rest. So that's my harvest for today. Some delicious looking runner beans and some more apples for storing. So good times. Well, that's me done for today. It's been a bit of a shed edition, I know, but I think it's important to get things laid out correctly because I'm going to be living with it for a long time. So it's worth giving it lots of thought, and thanks to everybody for their fantastic suggestions. There were loads, and well, that's me done for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want my uploads, then every Wednesday and every Sunday at 8 PM, click on the bell and you'll be notified. Diolch yn fawr.